Hey guys, tonight we're heading to one of the world's oldest cities, Babylon. The air is thick with spice and dust, the sky a velvet canopy stretched over ziggurats and rooftop gardens. You're not here to decipher cuneiform or decipher the stars, nope. You're here for something far more thrilling. A sleepy little board game night in a quiet side alley just beyond the main avenue. A circle of oil lamps flicker to life. Shadows stretch like lazy cats along the walls. Somewhere nearby, a lyre plucks out an uneven tune, maybe drunk, maybe just shy. And then you hear it, the familiar clack of game pieces on stone, low laughter, and the kind of confident boasting that only a man with 3 good rolls in a row dares to make. You haven't even stepped into the courtyard yet, and someone's already calling you over. Come on, they shout. You can't sleep on an empty win streak. You probably won't survive this timeline, to be honest, between the questionable beer, crocodile dung sunscreen, and the odd chance of a war chariot running you over. But hey, you will finally learn how to play the royal game of your so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and hey, if you're feeling social, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Always cool to see who's sharing these quiet nights together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as the neighborhood regulars are settling in. The gaming boards are etched into wide stone slabs, and the young boy is lighting the last lamp, its glow casting warm amber over the space. The boards are simple at first glance. A few grids, paths marked by carvings worn smooth by centuries of playful friction. But don't be fooled. This isn't child's play. These are battlefields of reputation. This city doesn't sleep, it shifts, breathes, argues over whether that last roll was truly fair. And when someone loses, they don't go quietly. A middle-aged brickmaker huffs as he tosses his final pebble and watches it land just shy of the victory square. His opponent, a tiny woman with 2 missing teeth and a victorious smirk, raises both arms and cackles like a hyena with gout. You should have prayed harder. To Ishtar, she says, biting off a bit of date and chewing smugly. Maybe she'd have thrown you a 6. Historians still argue whether Babylon's board games were purely for leisure or carried religious significance. Some clay tablets suggest temple ties, while others seem purely recreational. But here, tonight, it's just about fun and the gentle ego bruising that follows a humiliating loss. Someone pulls you into a game. The board is made of polished wood with inlaid lapis lazuli, a luxury for this modest gathering. The pieces are shaped like small pyramids, and the dice, if you can call them that, are long tetrahedral things that clatter like tiny bones. A girl next to you whispers the rules with the slow patience of someone who enjoys watching newcomers. Lose. You want to land your piece on mine, she says, grinning, so you can send me all the way back to start. Oh, you say? It's that kind of game. Yes, she replies. The best kind? You toss the dice and move your first piece. The others groan as it lands in a safe zone, a tiny square etched with a star. You're safe. For now, they start making jokes at your expense, not cruel ones. The kind that endear you to the table. Someone calls you the Great Lagash Loser, even though you're clearly not from Lagash. Another swears you must have kissed a donkey for luck. You don't know what that means, but you smile and nod like you do. This is Babylon, complex, elegant, and completely obsessed with games. The stars deepen above you, and from a nearby rooftop, a lute player begins a sleepy ballad about a fisherman who fell in love with a river spirit and lost his catch for 7 days straight. Someone laughs and rolls their dice harder, as if trying to knock fate into submission. An older man, perhaps a merchant or former soldier, leans close. You know, he says. "We used to gamble for shoes back when sandals had real worth. Now it's all clay tokens and bragging rights. Which is worse?" You ask. He shrugs. "At least my feet were warm." The game wraps up. You lose spectacularly, but they invite you back anyway. Not because you're good, but because you're fun to beat. As the crowd disperses, a young boy collects the pieces, placing them into a small satchel tied to his belt. You notice the pouch is embroidered not with a name, but with a symbol. A star within a square dot, the same as the save zone on the board. Family crest? You ask. He shakes his head. "No, just my favorite spot." And with that, he vanishes into the dark, the soft jingle of dice fading like a lullaby into the night. You wake slowly to the sound of shutters being unlatched and sun spilling in sideways over clay rooftops. The smell of baking barley bread drifts upward on the dry morning air, mingled with the sharper scent of goat pens and heated stone. Babylon is awake again, and it turns out, so are its games. In the dusty square near the Ishtar Gate, vendors are already spreading out their wares across linen cloths and wooden carts. It's not grain or fabric that draws the crowd, though it's the little piles of carved game pieces, ivory knucklebones, palm-sized clay tiles with dots, even rare imported dice made of polished obsidian. You wander past one stall where a short woman is rearranging her display of figurines into neat sets. "These are authentic priest-class counters," she says confidently, holding up a piece shaped like a falcon. "Carved during the reign of Samshualuna." You nod politely. Historians still argue whether Samshualuna actually ruled during the period when these particular game pieces were made, but you don't mention that. You're too polite, and frankly, you don't want to get kicked out of the market for being that person before breakfast. A boy races past you with a satchel full of hand-chiseled dice and a proud expression. "Fresh roll makers," he shouts. "Guaranteed lucky unless you're cursed." The market thrives on games. Beside a stall selling dried figs, two older men crouch in the shade, deeply engrossed in a variant of the game of yore. One of them slams a piece down dramatically and declares, "That move was taught to me by Marduk himself." "Did Marduk also teach you to cheat?" The other retorts without looking up. This sparks an argument over what counts as divine instruction versus dirty tricks, and a nearby fruit seller casually slips a copper into the pot, betting on the underdog. You keep walking, drawn to the tangle of sounds. Bargaining, laughing, pieces clattering. Someone explaining the house rules of Sumerian solitaire to a bored-looking goat. You stop to watch a girl no older than 10 lay out her own hand-drawn game board, just scratched lines in the dirt, but she's got 6 smooth stones and a bundle of dried chickpeas acting as player tokens. She offers you a seat. You hesitate. "What are the stakes?" she grins. "Your dignity." "Well, you already lost that last night, so what's one more round?" The chickpeas are stubborn, the board uneven, but the tension is real. She's ruthless and quietly keeps track of points in her head. You win one round by accident, and she squints at you suspiciously, as though divine intervention just threw off her perfect strategy. When she finally wins, and she always does, she gestures for your imaginary dignity and tucks it into her invisible pouch with a smug nod. Then she lets you go. Around the next corner, a craftsman is putting the final glaze on a new board. This one is a thing of beauty. Terracotta base, ivory inlays, polished edges. The design is a spiral rare for Babylonian boards more common. In neighboring Susa, he sees you looking and winks. "For 2 shekels, I'll teach you how to rig a spiral match." Historians still debate whether such spiral games were local innovations or borrowed from Elamite merchants. Either way, cheating tips from an artisan feel more like customer service than scandal. You pass a stall selling reeds and ink, where a scribe leans out and mutters, I saw the royal courier lose 5 oxen in a game last week. Was he upset? You ask. No, the scribe replies, just annoyed that they made him walk back to the palace. Even the official class can't resist. Everywhere you turn, Babylon seems less like a city of politics and gods and more like one enormous, dusty tournament bracket. You pause near a low wall where a group of older women are sorting pebbles by color and gossiping. They aren't playing yet. They're prepping for their weekly tournament, known simply as the sweep. The goal, one explains, is to clear your pieces before the others, but you're also allowed to shout ancient insults and accuse them of being haunted. You blink. Haunted? Oh yes. If someone rolls poorly, it's customary to blame their ancestors or their laundry. You learn that games here aren't just about luck or skill, they're social glue. They smooth over feuds, stir up laughter, teach children math, and give elders a stage to prove they still have teeth sharp enough for wit, even if not for meat. There's even a rumor going around that Queen Amalatu herself has a secret game. Board inlaid with lapis and carnelian, passed down through royal women since Hammurabi. No one's seen it, of course, but it's whispered that every piece is carved to resemble a long-dead noble, and that victory grants permission to rewrite one palace law. It's probably nonsense. But it's Babylon, so who really knows? A vendor selling sesame cakes offers you one for free. Only if you promise to beat my cousin in tonight's match. You agree. It's probably a trap, but the cake's delicious, and your dignity's already gone, remember? As the sun climbs higher, the game boards disappear beneath cloths, pieces tucked away in pouches and pottery jars. The day belongs to labor and coin and sunstroke, but the games wait, always. Tucked beneath beds, behind scroll shelves, in the corners of wine shops. You get the sense that in Babylon, every day ends with a roll of the dice, even if you're just deciding who has to sweep the floor. Later that afternoon, with the heat humming against the city's pale brick walls, you slip into the cooler, shaded halls of the royal palace. You're not entirely sure how you ended up here. Maybe it was the sesame cake vendor's cousin who waved you in, or maybe it's just Babylon being Babylon, where hierarchies get fuzzy after a shared joke or a lucky throw. The palace smells faintly of sandalwood and ink. Somewhere nearby, a scribe is reciting the list of temple contributions for the week. But you follow the sound of dice, yes. Even in this gilded seat of power, the game continues. You pass through an archway into a quiet chamber, and the atmosphere shifts. The walls are hung with woven reed panels and painted murals of victories past, but it's the table at the center that catches your eye. It's not for dining. It's not for maps or treaties. It's a gaming table, long and low, with ivory, legs shaped like lion paws and inlays of blue glass forming delicate playing squares. 3 courtiers are seated around it, dressed in flowing robes that whisper with movement. One has a lap full of game pieces, polished to a shine, and another is scribbling notes into a palm-sized tablet with a stylus of gold. The third player, a woman with a crescent-shaped diadem, appears to be winning. She doesn't smile. She doesn't have to. You sidle in. They pretend not to notice, which is palace speak for you may observe. But breathe too loudly, and we will have you escorted out by a man with opinions about elbows. The woman moves a piece forward. The man with the tablet groans. Again, he mutters. Are you communing with the gods or just unusually skilled at probability? She replies without blinking, the gods have taste. Historians still argue whether royal courts in Babylon used games purely for pleasure or also as tools of diplomacy. It's plausible. What better way to measure someone's temperament than to watch them lose 3 times in a row without throwing a platter? As you observe, it becomes clear that this isn't just a pastime. This is politics. One player subtly changes the stakes mid-game. Another offers an olive, not as a snack, but as an unspoken concession. And the tablet? It's not keeping score. It's recording patterns, who plays boldly, who hesitates, who bluffs, who prays. A steward enters with a clay jar of chilled wine. He doesn't speak, but the players pause to sip, eyes never leaving the board. You get the distinct sense this match has been going on for days. Maybe longer. You're standing too close now. The diadem woman looks up directly at you. Care to take over for my opponent? She asks, her voice like smoke over water. He needs a moment to remember how to win. Your stomach tightens. It might be a trap, but it might also be fun. You nod. Take his seat. The game is something between your and 9 men's Morris. The board is crisscrossed with colored lines and square inlays, and the pieces are shaped like miniature bulls and stars. She hands you a bull. You're the earth, she says. Try not to embarrass it. The next few moves are slow, tense, not because of difficulty, but because of the gaze of the other courtiers. And the steward. And yes, that one guard who's pretending to polish a spear, but is definitely keeping score. She moves her star to a corner square and traps your bull. Unfortunate, she says with the tiniest arch of one eyebrow. Didn't they teach you basic symmetry in Lagash? You consider responding with something equally dry, but you're too focused on not sweating through your tunic. You play your next move slowly, purposefully, and this time you land your bull directly on one of her pieces. Gasps. Very small, very polite gasps. One courtier actually coughs. She stares at the board. Then at you. Well, she says at last, maybe the earth isn't as slow as I thought. Someone nearby chuckles. You think it's the steward. You're not sure if that's good. The game continues, now with a rhythm. A kind of dance between opponents. No taunts now, no overt jokes, just precise movements, each carrying hidden messages in a court where every gesture might mean more than it seems. When the game finally ends, she wins. Obviously, she nods at you with the faintest trace of respect. You may keep the bull, she says, rising gracefully, to remind you not to step into corners without an exit. You bow, not too deep. Just enough to show you're grateful and not entirely foolish. The steward approaches and slips something into your hand. It's a token. A small ivory tile with an etched sun. Good match, he whispers. Don't lose that. Some doors only open with the sun. He's probably being poetic. Probably, you leave the chamber with the piece in your palm, warm from his touch, and a lingering sense that you just participated in something that was technically entertainment, but might also be the reason a trade deal gets signed next week. Outside, the afternoon sun still burns, but the air feels different. Like you've moved up a level in some invisible hierarchy. You never applied to join Dot and all because you knew how to roll a bull across a board. You step back out into the golden haze of late afternoon Babylon, where the palace walls meet the streets like the edge of a dream brushing up against something louder, dustier, and more likely to involve someone shouting about figs. And sure enough, someone is shouting about figs, but that's not why you pause. You pause because on the far side of the square, 2 merchants, both with sunburnt faces and voices like whetstones, are deep in an argument. Not about trade, not about camels, not even about taxes. They're arguing about dice. 3 rolls. 3. One yells, gesturing wildly with a woven satchel of grain. And every single one a flat side. You're holding the dice upside down. Again, the other mutters. You've got the luck of a scorpion in winter. You drift closer, pretending to inspect some incense sticks. A nearby vendor nudges you with her elbow and whispers, they've been at it since sunrise. Neither. One's won a game since Hammurabi had hair. You chuckle under your breath. It's not entirely clear whether she's joking or just quoting an old proverb, but either way, it's catchy. They're playing on a makeshift board scratched into a worn leather mat. The pieces are simple, worn pebbles, but they've each personalized. There's one's dyed a deep red, the other painted with tiny white dots. The dice are bone, with each side marked by burnt notches and faint carvings. You ask what they're playing. They both answer at once with different game names. King's Path, Snake Roads. They scowl at each other. It's clearly Snake. Roads, the red pebble merchant says. The rule about leaping over doubles only works in Snake Roads. It's clearly King's Path, the other insists. Only King's Path ends with a sun square. You blink. Maybe it's a hybrid? They pause, consider, then shrug in unison. Historians still debate the exact rules of ancient Babylonian games, largely because each surviving board seems to have different markings. The game of Ur is the best known, but even it had variation, some regional, some just the result of enthusiastic rule bending. What matters isn't historical purity. It's that people remember and argue loudly, preferably over figs. Eventually, the two men invite you to roll. Neutral party, one mutters. You decide which set of rules applies today. You roll a 5. Both men nod in opposite directions. One of them hands you a small pouch. Inside are game pieces carved from dates pits, each etched with tiny geometric shapes. For luck, he says, or for bribery. Dealer's choice. You move on, winding deeper into the market where the crowd begins to shift. The stalls here are shaded with bright cloths, the voice is more musical, the smells more savory. You've reached the foreign quarter, where traders from across the known world come to barter, haggle and gossip. And of course to gamble. Stall draped with dyed silks. 3 men are seated cross-legged on woven rugs, playing a game you've never seen before. It looks like a fusion of dice and cards, if cards were small flat shells. Painted with symbols, and dice were rolled into a sand circle instead of a cup. One player gestures you over. You from the main gate? He asks. You nod. Vaguely. Perfect, he says, pushing a handful of shells toward you. We need someone who doesn't know the rules to keep us honest. You sit. The game begins. It's chaotic, shouting, hand slaps, dramatic sand swirling, but it's also oddly beautiful. The pieces catch the sunlight and every loss is met with poetry. You cost me the stars of Ashur, one man sighs, flopping backward. I'll never recover. That's because you play like a goat with vertigo, his friend snaps. You catch on quickly. The objective is to match shell patterns with dice results, collecting points in the form of little dried lentils. You win your first round, mostly by accident. Beginner's luck, they groan. Or maybe Babylon likes you. They offer you a drink of fermented date beverage that tastes like honey, mixed with sarcasm, and ask if you've ever played with the camel traders from Elam. You haven't. But they describe a game that sounds suspiciously like modern backgammon, only with rules that shift depending on the position of the moon. You're kidding. You say, dead serious, one says, slapping your shoulder. Last week I lost an entire set of wool blankets because Venus entered Taurus. You wonder aloud whether astrology should really influence dice games. They stare at you in theatrical horror. You don't believe in lunar bonuses? One gasps. Blasphemy. You're joking, of course, mostly. But it reminds you of something. That in Babylon, the line between game and religion, chance and prophecy, is thinner than parchment. As the game winds down, one of the men hands you a stone. Token carved with a lion's face. Use this if you ever challenge a temple priest, he says. It's not lucky, but it's dramatic. You thank him. And of course, pocket the token. Because in this city, luck may be real or fake or imported, but it's always collectible. As you walk away, The scent of roasted lentils trails after you, and the fading shouts of "that roll defied physics" echo back across the market square. You make your way toward the gates again, and for a moment, the chaos fades. You spot a child on a rooftop, slowly arranging pieces on a board made from roof tiles and chalk. He's alone, concentrated, whispering something to each piece as he places it. You don't interrupt, because in Babylon, even the smallest game can be a quiet ritual, and tomorrow someone will argue about whether the chalk lines count. The shadows stretch longer now, thin and golden, spilling through the cracks in the massive gates of Babylon as you wander eastward toward the edge of the city. You're following a scent, no, not bread this time. Smoke, sandalwood, and barley, maybe a bit of dried pomegranate peel. But under all of that, incense, and chanting. Not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, rhythmic. You duck beneath a faded awning and find yourself at the threshold of a small temple, one of the lesser-known shrines, tucked between two brick storehouses, and guarded by a single slouching dog who only lifts his head to acknowledge your presence before going back to dreaming about bones or glory. Inside, it's cool. Not cold, but the kind of cool that hugs your ankles like slow water. The space is simple reed mats, low stools, a painted wall of stylized stars, and at the center, a short altar with a faded cloth draped over it. On that cloth, 2 cubes, and a crescent-shaped game board inlaid with fragments of glass. The priests are playing, not solemnly, not really. There's a ritual quality to their posture, sure, but you can see the glimmer of competition in their eyes. Each move is precise. Each roll of the dice feels like part of a spell. But when one of them mutters, "You always roll like that when you've skipped morning prayers," the illusion of detached piety crumbles a bit. "Sit," says one, gesturing at a nearby cushion. "You can observe or be judged. You choose to observe." For now, the game they're playing is unfamiliar, some mix of chance and interpretation. The board is divided into paths, and the goal, as far as you can tell, is to guide a single piece to the end while avoiding omens. These are squares marked with cuneiform glyph stars, rivers, snakes, moons. Each roll of the dice determines both movement and the interpretation of the move. "Oh, you landed on the double stars with a 6, one priest says. "That's clearly a sign of forthcoming embarrassment." "Only if you interpret it through Ninurta," the other argues. "Through Ishtar, it implies ... flirtation." "You're stretching." The first priest huffs. Historians still argue whether religious figures in Babylon used games purely for entertainment or if they also functioned as tools for divination. Some suggest dice were used alongside liver, readings, and star charts to consult the divine, while others suspect priests just needed something fun to do. Between sacrifices and sermon writing, you lean closer as one priest makes a particularly risky move. He's landed on the snake glyph. He smiles. "You think that's bad?" he says to the other. "But remember last week, when you rolled 2 snakes and your goat went into labor during temple readings? I told you," the other sighs. "That was coincidence." Tell that to the goat. There's something soothing about watching them bicker like old friends playing the same game for 30 years and still pretending they're surprised by the outcomes. Their movements are gentle, ritualized. One of them blows softly on the dice before rolling, murmuring something under his breath. You catch only a few words: guidance, chance, clarity. You ask, hesitantly, if the gods really care who wins. One priest blinks at you, then grins. The gods don't care who wins, but they do care if you cheat. Which brings you to an important moment. The priest with the better robe pulls a small tile from his sleeve. It's faintly worn, with a smudge that looks like it used to be a star. His opponent narrows his eyes. "You brought star drift into the temple again? You can't prove that's what this is." the robed man replies innocently. Stardrift, you learn, is a notorious piece from a variant of the game of You're Supposedly So Lucky. It was banned from Temple Games 2 reigns ago. According to rumor, it belonged to a merchant who used it to win 43 games in a row, then mysteriously lost everything except the tile itself. The priest rolls. The tile lands on the moon glyph. There's a beat of silence. That means humility. The other mutters, "You're not supposed to win." "I'm practicing humility," the robed priest replies, gesturing extravagantly at the altar. "Look at all this humility." They keep playing. You stay longer than you meant to. There's something deeply hypnotic about the rhythm of their movements, the soft chanting, the laughter that slips through like a secret shared between friends. The incense curls in lazy spirals, like the board's own paths unfolding in air. Eventually, one of the priests gestures toward a small side table. On it sits a clay tablet, freshly inscribed. "You may add your name if you like," he says. "Those who witness the god's humor should be remembered." You take the stylus. Scratch your name or something close enough to it that a few thousand years from now, a bored archaeologist might find it and raise an eyebrow. You leave with a small pouch of herbs, a promise of mild prophetic dreams, and a vague suspicion that the Stardrift tile has mysteriously vanished again. Outside, dusk is falling. The dog is gone. Or maybe never was. The city sounds return in waves' voices. Footsteps, a distant clang of a gate being shut for the evening. But beneath it all, you carry with you the echo of dice tumbling over polished stone. And a reminder, even gods sometimes enjoy a good game. The sky shifts to a soft lavender, and you find yourself meandering back toward the scribe's quarter, where lamplight glows against rows of flat-roofed buildings and the streets quiet into murmured conversation. You're still holding that Stardrift pouch from the temple, and it's giving you more confidence than it probably should. Just as you're wondering whether to try your luck at another impromptu match, you hear the scrape of stylus on clay rapid, almost frantic, and the muttered rhythm of someone deep in concentration. You peek through a narrow doorway and see a man hunched over a clay tablet, scribbling furiously. His robe is askew, his beard dusted with flour or chalk, and beside him is a row of tiny game pieces, stars, bulls, lions, crescents. Another scribe, younger, lounges nearby with a tablet of his own. He's not writing. He's keeping score. They're recording games, not just who won or lost, but how. Which opening strategy was used, what moves followed what throws, how long each round lasted, who insulted whom, and how effective the insult. Was it throwing off the opponent's rhythm? You step inside as casually as possible. You tallying a tournament? You ask. The older man looks up, his eyes bleary but bright. Tournaments? No. These are case studies. He points to the dozens of tablets stacked in neat rows, each marked with names and dates. We are preserving the history of gameplay itself. The younger scribe grins. Some people build temples. We build leaderboards. Historians still debate whether such detailed scorekeeping was common or an eccentric indulgence. Clay tablets containing rules and player names have survived, but few record what actually happened during the games. Here, though, every match becomes a story. The elder scribe beckons you closer. He's just finished etching in the final move of a game between a brewer named Talmik and a widow named Inara. According to the notes, she used an aggressive early start strategy and Talmik never recovered. He tried to distract her by singing. The scribe mutters, but she countered by pretending not to hear him. You ask if you can help record a match. He hands you a blank tablet and a stylus. You can scribe your own defeat, the younger man says, chuckling. Or someone else's, if you're lucky. You find a game already underway in the courtyard, a pair of cousins arguing over which dice belong to which deity, and whether using mismatched pieces affects divine favor. You squat beside them, tablet in hand, and begin to write. The stylus feels awkward at first, but you fall into rhythm. You record every roll, every dramatic groan, every moment one of them accuses the other of divine interference. You invent shorthand for taunts. You make a star shape in the corner when a particularly bold move earns applause from a watching. Neighbor. As the game continues, you become aware of how much story lives inside each match. It's not just numbers and moves. It's tempo, swagger, superstition. One cousin taps the board before each throw, convinced it helps. The other avoids eye contact, preferring to announce her moves to the moon instead of her opponent. The game ends with a tie. A rare, satisfying outcome. You write that down 2. Back in the scribe's workshop. The older man reads your tablet, lips moving silently. When he finishes, he nods once. You have an eye for drama, he says. That's what keeps history interesting. The younger scribe claps you on the back. You should help us document the Festival of Tiles next month. That's when the royal guards challenge the city bakers. You raise an eyebrow. They bake edible game boards. He adds, last year, someone tried to eat the winning piece. You glance around at the shelves, rows upon rows of quiet, dusty drama. The stories are there, frozen in clay, victories, clever insults, miracles of luck, disasters born of hubris. There's a certain dignity to it, not just in the playing, but in the remembering. The elder pulls out a much older tablet. It's cracked in two, and the markings are faint, but you can still read them. The Game of Stars, played on the third night of the blood moon. Player 1, Lamasi Weaver. Player 2, Unknown Traveler. The winner. Traveler. There's a note. The stranger claimed to be taught by wind and river. Moved without hesitation. Left before dawn. Ever seen this piece? He asks, showing you a small, chipped figurine shaped like a flame. It's all we have from that night. You hold it. It's light, worn smooth. You wonder who the traveler was, and whether they'd be amused to know they're still being whispered about centuries later. You return it carefully. He nods again, satisfied. The sky outside has deepened into blue velvet. You thank the scribes and step back into the night, the scent of dried reeds and ink lingering in your nose. As you walk, you can't help but think about the stories you're making. How many rolls and near misses and quiet victories you've already collected. How one day someone might write them down. Maybe not on clay, maybe not in Babylon. But still, somewhere. The stars are beginning to take their places in the sky, one by one, like careful game pieces on a celestial board. And as you turn down another alley, following the smell of roasting lentils and something suspiciously like cardamom, you hear the unmistakable sounds of a tavern in full swing. Laughter, mug slams, and beneath it all, that familiar clatter of dice meeting wood. You duck through a low curtain-brushed linen, dyed ochre, and step into a low-ceilinged room that smells like warm beer, spiced stew, and lightly singed arguments. The light is golden and flickering, thrown by lamps wedged into cracked niches in the walls. It's not elegant, it's not even clean, but it's alive. The tavern's full of locals. Bricklayers, bakers, scribes off duty, a few travelers judging by the wear on their sandals. In the far corner, a man with a voice like a war drum is shouting about having rolled 3 doubles in a row. That's not luck. He bellows. That's destiny. Destiny doesn't forget to pay its bar tab. Someone fires back. You're spotted almost instantly. New face, new stories. And most importantly, new dice hand. A young woman in a tunic several cups into the evening waves you over. To an open table. The board is scratched into the wood itself, lines worn from generations of play and spilled broth. The pieces are mismatched. A chipped button, a dried fig, a shard of pottery shaped like a fish. "We play rough," she says with a grin. "You in?" You nod. "Of course you are. The game is simple enough. Move your piece across the grid, capture." The opponents shout dramatic insults whenever your piece is taken. Apparently, the more creative the insult, the more mercy you might be shown later. Within moments, you're rolling and losing. Spectacularly. "Have you tasted your own dice?" Someone asks, mock concerned. They may be cursed. You fire. Back with, "So's your stew, but we're still here." This earns a cheer from the corner table. As the match continues, the tone gets rowdier. Someone stands on a bench to reenact their last move using salt shakers. Another player tries to bribe the dice with a chunk of flatbread. Across the room, two older men are having a duel of wits entirely in Proverbs. When the lion loses his tail, one says, sipping slowly, the jackal makes a necklace. The other nods gravely. But if the jackal sneezes, the moon laughs. A third man, utterly baffled, mutters, "I think they're still talking about the game." Historians still argue whether taverns were hubs for gaming in a formal sense, or just natural gathering points for bored workers. Some records hint that tavern games were semi-regulated, especially when bets were involved. Others suggest they were total chaos equal parts game, social commentary, and group therapy session. You're starting to believe the latter. The woman across from you makes her final move, traps your piece, and grins like she's just secured. Diplomatic immunity. "Board's mine," she says. "But you get to name the game." You blink. "It doesn't have a name?" She shrugs. "It does now if you've got one." You think for a moment. Sweat and salt. There's a pause. Then nods of approval. "Better than Mudluck," someone mutters. That one never caught on. Someone rings a small bell near. The counter. It's an invitation for all losers, red, most of the room, to come claim a consolation fig. You're handed one, still warm from the clay oven. "Eat it," the barkeep says, "and you'll win next time." You doubt that. But the fig is delicious. As the tavern quiets just a little, a traveler near the door sets up a new board. It's different, triangular, with 3 rows of 7. He lays down pieces made of copper discs and smooth glass beads. A few curious heads turn. He catches your eye. "Want to learn a game from the Zagreus?" he asks. You nod. "Of course you do." He explains the rules softly, like sharing a bedtime story. Each piece represents a shepherd or a sheep, and the goal is to guide the herd safely across the board. But your opponent? They play the wind and the wolves. There's a hush as the game begins. It's slower, strategic. You feel the room leaning in, not shouting now, but watching. This isn't just a game, it's a performance. When you're last. Shepherd finally crosses the edge of the board, escaping the wolf's pursuit. The tavern erupts in sleepy applause. A few people toss coins into a small bowl, not as a prize but in honor of the story. That's a win worth dreaming about, someone murmurs. The traveler packs up his pieces and hands you one, a tiny bead, black and green like forest moss. "For remembering," he says. You thank him, fig in hand, bead in pocket, belly full of laughter and stew. And as you step back out into the night, you realize something. Here in Babylon, the taverns may close, the oil lamps may gutter, but the games? They just wait for you to roll again. The moon now hangs high and round, gently diffusing its silver light across the mud brick walls of Babylon. You're walking through the back streets, guided by soft laughter and the rhythmic sound of small objects landing on stone. It draws you into a quieter part of the city, one not mapped, not marked, but lived in. Not where people rule, but where people play. You round a corner and see a low-walled courtyard bathed in moonlight. There are no men here, only women. 4 of them, seated on folded cushions beneath a hanging fig tree, tossing objects into a carved-out basin in the middle of their circle. One of them, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones, gestures at you with a flick of her wrist. "Well," she says, smiling, "you've wandered through half the city. You might as well stay." You hesitate only for a moment and then step inside. They're playing a game called Knucklebones, though there's nothing particularly bony about these pieces. They're smooth, shaped from baked clay and tiny animal bones polished to a buttery shine. Each is marked with a different symbol: a grain stalk, a crescent moon, a fish, a 5-pointed star. Land on the moon and you have to share a secret. One woman warns, narrowing her eyes playfully. Land on the fish and you owe the group a story. "And the star?" you ask. A pause. Then they all grin. You get to gloat. The game is simple, but layered. You throw 5 pieces in the air and catch them on the back of your hand, then toss again and try to scoop others while one remains. Aloft. It's dexterity and rhythm and just enough superstition to make it delicious. The women are good. Ridiculously good. One of them catches all 5 knucklebones with a flick of the wrist that could probably qualify her for royal espionage. Another pauses to tell you she's had 3 children and 7 husbands, but the bones are her longest love. You play, awkwardly at first, miss more than you catch. But they encourage you, mock you, praise your style. You catch like a priest, lighting a candle and laugh without malice. Someone hands you a cup of chilled date juice. It's slightly sour but refreshing. "Keep your hands cool," she says. "The bones don't like sweat." You ask where they learned to play. One gestures vaguely. "My mother, her mother, someone before that, maybe Inanna herself." Historians still argue whether knucklebones were merely children's games or tools for divination and adult entertainment. Some tablets suggest women often played them in domestic courtyards like this one, while others associate them with fortune-telling rituals. Tonight, they're clearly a bit of both. The oldest woman rolls a perfect star landing and immediately smirks at her neighbor. "That's 2 stars in one night. I'm invoking the privilege." "Oh no," the others groan, laughing. "The privilege," it turns out, is that she gets to give one of her own pieces to a player of her choosing and take one of theirs. A little twist of dominance that feels older than Babylon itself. She gives you her fish. "Takes your crescent. That's a good piece," she says. It listens. You don't ask what that means. You just nod and hold it tightly. Later, as the night grows deeper, the game slows. The women lean back, sip their drinks, fan themselves with their sleeves. The pieces lie scattered in moonlight, tiny constellations on clay. One of them tells a story about a match played during an eclipse, when all the bones landed flat and no one spoke for 3 days. Another swears she once rolled 5 stars in a row and her mother-in-law moved out the very next morning. "Coincidence?" she says, arching an eyebrow. "You tell me." You can feel the calm seeping in, the rhythm of the game, the joy in watching pieces spin and fall, the music and shared silence. One woman braids another's hair absent-mindedly. Another begins stacking the bones in towers, challenging you to a round of highest stack without collapse. You lose, twice, but they give you a bone anyway. A real one this time, worn smooth, carved with a flower on one end and a barely visible bird on the other. "For balance," the older woman says, tucking it into your palm. "Every game needs it." You say your goodbyes softly, like pulling a blanket up to your chin, and step back into the narrow alley, bones clicking in your pocket like a lullaby in miniature. The streets are almost empty now. Only the occasional oil lamp remains, flickering like the last player left at the board. But the games continue, quietly. Everywhere Babylon doesn't sleep, it just plays softer. The alleys narrow as you head deeper into the oldest part of the city, the kind of neighborhood that doesn't appear on formal scrolls or palace maps, but is written into the feet of those who've walked it for decades. You pass doorways worn, smoothed by generations of palms and stones embedded in the road that shine where countless sandals have rubbed them to a dull polished dot. It's quiet, but not in a lonely way. Just settled. And then you hear it: faint laughter, low voices, and the unmistakable click of game pieces on stone. You peek into a wide, open courtyard, lit only by the moon and the flicker of two tiny oil lamps perched on the ledge of a low wall. Here, children are long asleep. These are their mothers, aunts, and grandmothers, and they are fierce. 4 women, draped in night-colored shawls, are playing what looks like an evolved version of knucklebones, more elaborate, more layered. There are clay counters, pebbles, dyed scraps of linen, and even a dried pomegranate acting as the wager pot. You don't interrupt. You sit on a step just outside their circle, and they accept your presence with the same warmth you found all across the city. One of them lifts her chin toward you. "You've got good posture," she says. "Ever played Flick the Fig?" You admit you haven't. She grins. "Oh, you're in for something." Flick the Fig, as it turns out, is a game of precision, tension, and light mischief. The players line up small objects in a circle: stones, seeds, buttons, and take turns trying to flick a fig seed into the middle without disturbing any of the outer pieces. If you knock something over, you lose points. If you hit the center, you take one item from the circle and make a wish you never say aloud. They play without speaking during rounds. Just the quiet breath of focus, the tap of seed against stone, and then the inevitable muttered curses or triumphant clicks of tongues. One woman knocks over a pebble and huffs. "That's because you're sitting in my luck," she tells her neighbor, who promptly moves half an inch and mutters, "Better?" You try your hand. Your first flick launches the seed over the wall. A pause. Then, laughter. Kind, deep belly laughter. That shakes the pomegranate and nearly extinguishes one of the lamps. You're ambitious. One woman says, eyes twinkling, "That seed's on its way to Nineveh." They hand you another and adjust the target zone slightly for beginners. Your second try lands in the circle. Barely dot, they all nod solemnly, like you've passed a sacred test. You get to make a wish, one says, but it must be quiet and honest. You do. You're not even sure what you wished for. But the fig. Seed listens. Then the conversation turns. Not just to games, but to life. They talk about childhood matches that ended in tears. About strategies inherited from sisters and mothers long gone. About nights like this, long ago, when they'd sneak away from family duties just to sit in the dark and play like queens. One of them pulls a cloth bag from her sash. Inside are small counters shaped like birds and fish painted in faded reds and blues. They were her grandmother's, she says. Still lucky. Still fast. She lays out a simple race board on the stones, just lines scratched with a stick and a few pebbles marking hazards. Each player rolls a small disc made of clay and tries to advance without landing on a marked danger. The hazards are imaginary, but felt: scorpion pit, jealous neighbor, bad stew. The game turns into a narrative. Each move becomes a line of a story. You escape the jealous neighbor, but now your camel has hiccups. You found a shortcut, but it smells of wet goat. You won the race, but forgot your shoes at the temple. It's ridiculous. And perfect. Historians still argue about women's role in public life in ancient Babylon. While formal legal power was limited, domestic spaces like this courtyard were full of leadership, negotiation, strategy, and yes, a lot of playful competition. Games were part of that power. A way to bond, to boast, to teach, and to pass time. With laughter instead of labor. As the night stretches on, the conversation softens. The counters are returned to their pouches, the fig seeds tucked away. Before you leave, one woman presses a tiny game token into your hand. It's shaped like a date pit, smoothed and painted with a single dot. For balance, she says, and for remembering. Every good match deserves a witness. You thank them deeply. And as you step back into the silence of the alley, you realize something again, perhaps more clearly than before. Babylon isn't just a place of grand temples and towering gates. It's a city of courtyards, of low voices, and small games played under stars. And some of its fiercest players don't need a palace or a priest to feel powerful. They just need flickable figs and a circle of friends. As the night deepens into a quiet hum, the city exhales. The gates creak shut, the fires in the forges fade to coals, and the wide thoroughfares lie nearly empty. You drift toward one of the quieter corners of the city, where lanterns are few. And laughter is softer. It's here, on the sandstone steps of a public well, that you see them, half a dozen boys and girls, no older than 12, crouched in a tight circle. Their tunics are dusty, their knees scraped, and their eyes sharp. They don't notice you at first. They're too busy carving game boards directly into the fade to the sun-warmed stone. You watch from a respectful distance. The tools are crude, just bits of broken pottery and worn metal, but the marks are clean, deliberate. One child scrapes out a path of zigzag lines. Another etches stars in each corner of a square. They argue over design choices with the conviction of emperors. If we put a pit here, then the game goes too fast. But we need a trap space. That's the whole point. You always want trap spaces. That's why no one plays your version. You finally cough lightly, and one of them turns, squints, then gestures casually for you to join. Extra hands can smooth the edges. You crouch beside them and gently help clear the dust from one corner of the board. There's a rough elegance to a geometry that somehow survives, being drawn with broken crockery. One of the older boys explains the rules. You nod as if you understand. You don't. Neither do they, it seems, because 5 minutes in, someone changes the rules entirely. Now you have to roll before each move. Unless you rolled a 6, in which case you skip and everyone groans. Unless it's after moonrise. Then 6s go backward. Why? Because it's night. Fair enough. There are no proper game pieces here. They use whatever's available: clumps of dry clay, seed pods, pebbles, a bit of copper wire curled like a snail. One girl proudly reveals her lucky cat tooth, though no one can confirm whether it's actually a tooth or a particularly pointy bit of gravel. What's remarkable isn't the game itself, it's the way they hold the space. They negotiate. Rules like diplomats, settle disputes with dramatic reenactments, and keep score by scribbling lines on the step with charcoal. You ask what the game's called, they look at each other. One shrugs. It's ours. And it is. Historians rarely find records of games played by children in ancient cities. The clay tablets focus on law, trade, gods, and kings. But here, in the worn-down corners of civilization, children scratch their own legacies into stone. You suspect this game won't last the week. Not because it's flawed, but because by tomorrow, they'll make a new one. And the next. And the next. But tonight, it's perfect. One child points at a faint symbol you hadn't noticed. A triangle with 3 dots inside it. That's the cursed square, he explains. If you land there, you have to tell a story. What kind of story? Doesn't matter. But it has to have food, and a donkey, and someone crying. You nod solemnly. That seems reasonable. You land there on your next move, of course. So you tell a tale half true. half borrowed about a man who loses a bet and ends up bartering his sandals for a slightly magic chickpea stew. The stew makes him cry. The donkey watches, unimpressed. It's not your best work. But they laugh anyway. Later, as the game winds down and a few younger players start to nod off mid-roll, one of the older girls digs in a little cloth pouch and pulls out a broken tile shaped like a crescent. She offers it to you. For playing fair, she says. And because you didn't argue when the rules changed. You accept it with the kind of reverence it deserves. Before you leave, they ask if you'll come back tomorrow. We're making a new board, one says, with a river in the middle. And crocodiles, another adds, and maybe flying pigs. You tell them you'll try. Because honestly, you want to see how they'll make that work. As you walk away, you pass an older man sitting on a stoop nearby. He gives you a slow nod. They've carved more boards into this street than bricks in the temple, he says. Some days, I think the stones remember. You believe it, because somewhere beneath your feet are layers of game boards long faded, scratched. By hands long gone, rules forgotten, jokes whispered and blown away by the evening wind. But they matter. They always matter. The night air cools as you wander toward the outer edge of Babylon, past shuttered stalls and half-covered carts, where the street widens into a broad path leading toward the southern gate. The wind smells of dust, dry grass, and distant smoke. And out here, far from the bustle of the market and the soft insults of tavern games, you hear a different kind of laughter. It's the kind that's trying not to be heard, low, breathless, and full of bets. You follow the sound to a patch of hard-packed earth just outside the main wall, where a cluster of men in leather armor are gathered around a low wooden crate, squinting at dice by torchlight. Soldiers. Off-duty, off the record, but very much on the edge of competition. One of them rolls and curses as both dice land flat against the rim of the crate and bounce out. A cheer goes up. Disqualified, someone calls. Weighted dice. Another yells. Grinning. The accused player picks up the dice and kisses them both with exaggerated flair. Don't betray me again, he says to them solemnly. You step a bit closer. One of the younger guards sees you and gestures toward the empty spot beside him. Come lose with us, he says cheerfully. No coin tonight, just rations. You sit, and they hand you a small, heavy pouch filled with objects you weren't expecting. Beans, bits of dried meat, flatbread crusts. Currency, another explains. We keep the good stuff for bribes and regrets. The game is simple. Roll the dice, aim for matching numbers, and wager more each round. But as you quickly learn, the true game isn't on the board. It's in the banter you throw like a tax collector in sandals. At least I don't aim like one. That's not a roll, that's a gentle suggestion. They laugh, shout, elbow, and roar with every lucky turn and miserable loss. One man loses all his bread crusts in 2 rounds and bets his belt next. He loses that too. Now he's threatening to wager his boots. Someone warns him that bare feet invite scorpions. He shrugs. Better than barefoot pride. Historians still debate how common gambling was among Babylon's military class. Officially, soldiers were expected to uphold honor and discipline. Unofficially, they probably threw dice as often as they threw spears. Some archaeological finds even suggest officers' dice made of polished agate, heavier, sleeker, and far less fair. You don't win often, but you survive. You even earn back a piece of dried apricot you didn't know you'd wagered. A small victory. One of the men leans over. You play like a poet, he says. Unlucky, but graceful. You accept the compliment. Someone produces a new game. Kind of guessing match. One player hides a small object in his hand, a ring, a carved button, a tooth, don't ask, and others must wager whether it's in his right or left. It sounds boring. It is not. Each round includes misdirection, whispered rumors, full-blown soliloquies, and the occasional fake sneeze. The soldier with the missing belt distracts the group with a convincing tale about a fish market brawl while slipping the token. Under his arm, he's caught anyway. "You're too theatrical," someone says. "Fish don't brawl." "They do in Nineveh," he insists. Around you, the game morphs again into riddles, then impressions, then something that might be a singing contest except no one can carry a tune and every song ends in shouting. But it's all framed in rules, loosely agreed upon, loudly enforced. Eventually, someone rolls the dice so hard they vanish into the grass. A search party is formed with one torch, one goat, uninvited, and much debate about whether stepping on a beetle voids the round. The dice are recovered. The beetle lives. The night thins. The torches gutter. One by one, the soldiers stretch out, on their cloaks or lean against their packs, full of bad wine and better stories. The man beside you hands you a piece of smoked cheese. You raise an eyebrow. "For effort," he says. You held your own. You ask if they play every night. "Only when we're lucky," he replies. He doesn't mean winning. The fire pops softly. The air cools. Someone hums an off-key lullaby meant for their kid back in. Akid. Someone else snores. And you sit a little longer, cheese in hand, watching the embers pulse in the dark like slow dice in the hands of time itself. Because even out here, where danger waits beyond the gates, the game goes on. And for now, luck favors the ones still playing. Dawn is still just a rumor on the horizon, the stars holding tight to their corners of the sky, when you find yourself pulled almost magnetically toward the wealthier district of Babylon. The streets here are cleaner, the walls more finely painted, and the silence more intentional. But even here, beneath awnings of imported silk and behind tall garden walls, the dice never rest. You round a mosaic-covered column and find a garden tucked between two tall houses. There are torches lit low, and soft music floats from somewhere, behind a curtain of reeds. And seated on a raised stone platform, like kings in miniature, are three men in layered robes embroidered with gold thread. Traders. Not the dusty, half-drunk ones hawking grain by the docks. These are merchants of high-rank dealers in lapis, incense, foreign wine, and knowledge itself. Their sandals cost more than some people's homes. Their rings gleam like temple offerings, and in front of them sits the game of your dot, not a replica. Not some child scratched-up version with fig seeds and goat tokens. This is the real thing. A perfect rectangle of gleaming wood and shell inlay, with blackened edges from oil lamp smoke and corners polished smooth by centuries of careful hands. You approach slowly. They glance up, not surprised, not offended, simply curious. "You're here early," one says, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Or late, depending on how you count your dreams." You sit. The air smells of cedar oil and pomegranate wine. "Know the game?" He asks. You nod. "Somewhat." He smiles. "Then you know nothing." "Excellent." The game of Ur was a favorite of the elite, fast-paced, symbolic, beautifully infuriating. You begin a round, and almost immediately, you're playing not just for position on the board, but for status. "You landed on the rosette square," one man says. "That's double movement." "Only if you're not wearing green," says another, eyeing your sleeve. You glance down. Your tunic has a hint of sage to it. Ruling?" You ask. They whisper. Debate. Confer with a fourth man, who seems to serve as both butler and referee. Ruling. "You may move, but not boast. Fair enough. The bets here aren't rations or fig seeds. They're favors. If I win this match," one says, "you'll send your wine shipment to Lagash, not Uruk." "If I win," says another, "you'll tell me what you paid for the cedar barrels." The third man smiles. "If I win, I get to name your next child. Laughter, but you suspect he's only half joking. You ask what you're playing for. If you win, says the man across from you, you may ask one question, and we must answer honestly. A hush. This is a table where secrets are traded like silver. You lose the first round badly. Your pieces scatter like frightened birds, and one of the merchants mutters a gentle insult about rookies from Sipper. But you learn fast. Second round, you hold your own. You land a rosette. You capture a piece. You read the rhythm not just of the board, but of the man. Who hesitates, who bluffs, who calculates like a priest reading liver. Historians still argue whether games like yore were strictly entertainment, or if they also served as training tools refining logic, strategy, and diplomatic finesse. Watching these merchants, you understand, it's all of that. And more. By the third round, you win. A silence falls. Not offended, just surprised. And perhaps a little impressed. The merchant across from you leans back, steepling his fingers. Well then, he says. Your question? You consider a moment. Then ask, what's the one game you've never beaten? He smiles, slow and soft. Time, he says. The others nod. One lifts his goblet in salute. But, the first man continues, we've come close. Especially on nights like this. You sip from a shared bowl of cold wine. The pieces are gathered. The board is gently wiped with a cloth scented with saffron and clove. Before you rise, one of the merchants offers you a single carved piece. It's a star 5-pointed ivory painted in indigo. From an old board, he says. The rest were lost in a sandstorm near Dillman. You thank him, the weight of it surprisingly light in your palm. Outside the garden, Babylon begins to stir. But here, for a few lingering moments, you've sat among kings of trade, negotiators of silk and oil and mystery, united not by treaty, but by the elegant geometry of a game so old that even the stars seem to lean closer when the dice hit the board. And you walk away, star piece in your pocket, knowing that in Babylon, power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it rolls a 4 and lands right where it meant to. Just when you think the night can't possibly give you more, Babylon unveils another layer like a well-played move, held back until just the right moment. You hear them before you see them. Trumpets. Not loud, not warlike, just confident. A procession of rhythm and ceremony weaving through the dawn-glazed garden corridors near the royal estate. You duck between two columns and see the crowd gathering, all facing the palace's outer courtyard, where torches blaze and banners ripple in the gentle breeze. Palace guards in ceremonial bronze breastplates stand in lines, watching impassively as the crowd murmurs with excitement. At the center, beneath an embroidered canopy stitched with golden flowers, stands a raised platform. Upon it, no joke, is a giant version of the game of yore. The board is nearly the size of a door, inlaid with lapis, obsidian, and mother of pearl. The pieces are waist-high, each one carved from wood and painted in brilliant hues. You've stumbled into the King's Tournament. Not just any tournament. This one is special. It's the annual Midsummer Match, held once a year, where nobles, priests, and scholars compete not for land or gold, but for a single golden piece, the royal token. This is the opening ceremony. Someone whispers beside you, a young scribe with a tablet and no sense of personal space. They say the king himself watches from behind the curtain. Does he play? The scribe scoffs. Of course not, but he bets. A hush falls. A court herald steps forward with the theatrical gravity of a man who definitely practices in the mirror. He reads aloud the names of the contenders, each one stepping up to the edge of the board, dressed like chess pieces come to life. There's a high priestess from the temple of Nana, a bearded astronomer who squints like he's trying to locate Mars, a general wearing enough rings to outfit a small army, and a pale woman in a sea blue robe whom no one seems to recognize. The match begins. You and the other spectators are allowed to wander around the edge of the platform, careful not to interrupt. The pieces are moved with staffs-long rods with hooks at the end to shift the heavy tokens smoothly across the enormous board. Each move is deliberate, ceremonial, and watched by at least 2 referees. The priestess opens with a bold double move, landing on a rosette square and earning scattered applause. "She always plays fast," murmurs someone near you. But she burns out. Next, the astronomer plays conservatively, choosing paths less taken. "He's calculating orbital alignment," another spectator jokes. He thinks the stars favor leftward strategies. Then comes the general. He slams a piece forward like he's launching a siege. It topples slightly, wobbles, and lands upright. The crowd cheers partly in relief. Finally, the blue-robed woman. She doesn't even look down. She speaks softly to her attendant, who moves the piece with a quiet grace. Her strategy is impossible to read. No hesitation. No celebration. Just one move after another, like unfolding a story no one else can see. You watch for what feels like minutes, but is probably hours. Time stretches. The crowd leans closer with every move. And slowly, incredibly, the pieces converge. Historians still argue about whether royal tournaments in Babylon were more for show or strategy. Some say they were designed to flatter nobility. Others insist they were genuine contests, high stakes. Mental battles wrapped in ritual and spectacle. You're starting to believe the latter, because now it's the final round. Only 2 players remain, the priestess and the blue-robed woman. The priestess smirks as she makes her move. She's ahead barely. Her piece is 1 square from the end. She turns to bow slightly to the crowd, soaking in the moment. Then the blue-robed woman speaks. Her attendant moves the final piece. It lands directly on the priestess's. A capture. Priestess gasps. The crowd roars. The referees nod gravely, and just like that, the match is over. The blue-robed woman bows, silent and serene. The herald steps forward. "The royal token," he declares, lifting a small gold disc etched with a radiant sunburst, "is hers." A court page steps out to present the token. She accepts it with both hands, then tucks it into the sleeve of her robe as though it's just another pebble. She vanishes behind a curtain. You look around, half expecting the crowd to erupt, or the king to appear, or fireworks to light the sky. But instead, people slowly drift away, murmuring softly, because that's how Babylon celebrates victory, with awe, not noise. Before you leave, the scribe beside you leans in. "They say she's not from here," he whispers. "She shows up once a year, wins, disappears." You raise an eyebrow. "Like a myth?" He nods. "Or a very disciplined ant." The board is already being dismantled, the platform swept. The staff stored. You walk away slowly, head buzzing, not from the excitement, but from the precision of it all. The way every player moved, like their reputation was made of glass. The way the crowd read meaning into every choice. You wonder what it's like to carry the royal token. To win not because of power or force, but because, for 1 perfect hour, your mind moved faster than fate. And in the quiet that follows, with birds beginning to stir and the first hints of sunrise tickling the rooftops, you find yourself wondering, could you win next year? The sun hasn't quite cleared the horizon yet, but Babylon is already glowing, its rooftops catching the first light like clay mirrors, its shadows stretching out with lazy familiarity. You walk slower now, your legs heavy but your mind crackling with everything you've seen. And still, the city offers more. As you turn down a narrow lane lined with pomegranate trees and cracked mosaic benches, you hear a low murmur, calm, confident, and full of stardust. You follow the sound to a small square, half courtyard, half observatory. 3 men in long robes are seated on low stools, their hands folded over their laps, their eyes turned upward. Court astronomers. They're watching the stars fade, noting the change in constellations as dawn threatens to wash the sky clean. You assume they're here to chart orbits, predict eclipses, maybe whisper about the gods' moods. But then one of them rolls a set of dice, and the other 2 cheer softly. You pause. Because, of course, even the ones who chart the universe for a living have dice. Come closer. One of them calls without looking down. We need a 4th. The moon has shifted, and we must recalibrate the luck. You take a seat on the smooth stone. On the ground between them lies a board you've never seen before round, divided like a wheel, with sections marked by stars, rivers, arrows, and birds. The dice are tiny, and instead of numbers, they're inscribed with symbols, little crescents, dots, and sunbursts. What is this game, you ask? The celestial ladder, one replies. A tool for divining patterns of misfortune and beans. Beans? He shrugs. It started as a snack, became something greater. They play slowly. The game is equal parts prediction and performance. You roll the dice, then choose a symbol from the board, and the others interpret what it means for you. There is no winning or losing, only deciphering. You roll a crescent and a bird. They murmur. Moon's influence. One says, but your path crosses a migrating omen. That means trade is favorable, another suggests. Unless you dream of fish, adds the third. Then it means indigestion. They nod, satisfied. Historians still argue about how astronomy and gaming overlapped in ancient Mesopotamia. Tablets show that Babylonian astronomers kept detailed records of celestial movements and chance outcomes. Some scholars believe games like this were used to teach cosmic principles. Others think they were just an excuse to talk about dreams and fate under the stars. Here, the line is blurred in the most delightful way. The astronomers continue playing, sipping from clay cups, and watching Venus fade into morning. One of them pulls out a small leather pouch and scatters its contents, tokens shaped like tiny turtles, each with a rune scratched into its back. These, he says, are called hesitations. You earn them when you second-guess a roll. You ask what happens when you collect too many. Then you become a philosopher, he replies. You smile. They deal you in again. The game shifts as the light changes. A raven squawks overhead, and one astronomer mutters that this alters the rolls again. Now the third move must point east, he says, or risk being mocked by the ancestors. You ask if the ancestors are usually so petty. Oh yes, he says, particularly about dice. He shows you a small clay tablet, barely larger than a palm. On it, carved symbols resemble your dice except in a completely different sequence. This is from a ruined temple, he says. Same shapes, entirely different meanings. So, which one is correct? He shrugs. Both or neither. Depends on whether you win. Eventually, your rolls become more confident. You land on a sun square, then a double bird, a rare combination. The astronomers blink. One leans forward. That combination hasn't appeared since the eclipse of Shulgi's third grandson. Or since last Tuesday, another says. They debate it for a while. You sit back, enjoying the hum of conversation that sounds like math wrapped in poetry. At the end of the game, they offer you a parting gift, a sliver of stone carved with a star chart. Not accurate, not useful, but beautiful and real. For clarity, one says, and for when clarity is a nuisance. You thank them. As you rise, the sun finally spills over the horizon. The astronomers nod to you, their eyes already drifting back toward the sky, ready to track new signs, new shifts, new cosmic inside jokes. You leave them behind, stone token in your hand, dice in your pouch. and a new understanding. Even those who chart the heavens need to roll once in a while, because in Babylon, the future is always part math, part mystery, and part wildly interpreted raven sighting. The city is waking properly now. You can hear it in the way sandals scrape faster over cobblestones, how stall doors bang open, how someone starts shouting the price of barley before they've even had breakfast. The sun casts long, honey-colored beams through the streets of Babylon, and yet your night hasn't quite ended, because just ahead, near the Eastern Bazaar, something new draws your eye. A small group has gathered under a striped canopy, some young, some old, a few wrapped in cloaks that speak of travel. Their accents are wrong for this part of town. Their clothes are stitched in ways you don't recognize. Foreigners, exiles, maybe, or traders stranded long enough to become permanent features. There, gathered around a strange board, flat and square, but marked with curving lines that spiral into a center circle. The pieces are not animals, stars, or tokens, they're hands. Not real ones, of course, but carved wooden hands, each in a different gesture. Pointing, closed fist, open palm, crossed fingers. One of the players waves you over. You've got the look of someone who can keep rules in their head for more than 5 seconds, she says. I've been playing Babylonian games all night, you reply. She smirks. Perfect. You'll be confused, but persistent. The game is called Whispers of Elam. It's part racing game, part bluffing match, and entirely chaotic. Each turn, players move along the spiral, trying to interpret their opponent's hand. Gesture before making their own. A correct guess grants extra movement. A wrong one? You go backward and are required to say a proverb in a language you don't speak. Luckily, you don't speak any of them. So your proverbs are improvised nonsense delivered with dramatic flair. Only a sideways egg knows when to rest. You announce that there is a pause. Then slow nods of approval. Wise, someone murmurs. Confusing, but wise. The gestures aren't arbitrary either. Some hold deep cultural meaning. A closed fist might mean confidence or challenge, or my brother once beat me at this and I'm still mad. An open palm could signal peace, or that you're hoping for mercy from the player to your left. The rules change every few rounds, as players introduce customs from their homelands. Someone from Susa insists that crossed fingers double all movement unless it's Tuesday. Another swears that pointing with the left hand is unlucky unless it's aimed at the board center. Wait, you say, is it Tuesday? A flurry of debate breaks out. Someone insists that Tuesday already happened, another that it hasn't begun yet, and a third that Babylon doesn't believe in Tuesdays. Historians still puzzle over the cross-cultural games exchanged during Babylon's peak. With traders and migrants from Elam, the Indus Valley, Anatolia, and beyond, Babylon became a melting pot of games within games. Most undocumented, some remembered only in fragments. Here, you see it in motion. The spiraling board has no written rules, yet everyone follows it like a story. They've half forgotten and are learning again in the telling. The woman across from you slams down a triple fist move. Apparently some rare maneuver that causes the entire board to reverse direction. Players groan, shuffle, and rotate their seats. You just cost me a perfect loop. Someone mutters, you shouldn't have eaten the lucky fig before the 4th round. She replies, you ask what a perfect loop is. Don't worry, she says. If you do one by accident, we'll let you know. The game winds on. At some point, someone starts adding pebbles to the center circle. No one explains why. You join in, placing one of your fig seed tokens from earlier in the pile. When the game ends, no one's sure who won, they all clap anyway. Someone declares it a diplomatic draw. Before they leave, one of the older players presses something into your palm. A flat disc made of glazed clay, etched with tiny, looping lines like water currents. "From my home," she says. "Play it forward." You ask what game it belongs to. She shrugs. "Maybe none. Maybe the next one." They scatter, the spiral board packed up, the gestures slowly fading like the tail end of a dream. You sit on a low wall, turning the token over in your hand, watching people return to the business of the day. But you've stepped outside time. For a while now, and the ordinary hum of commerce feels quieter somehow. Babylon is a city that absorbs everything: traders, gods, languages, weather, and games. It doesn't erase. It adds. Every traveler brings something new to the board. Every exile brings a game no one's seen. Every outsider gets invited in eventually. Because in Babylon, even if your rules are odd, if your gestures are off, if your dice are strange, you still get a turn. The sun warms your back as you stand. Play disc still in hand, and wonder how many other games are waiting just around the next corner. By now, the streets are buzzing. Children chase one another with sticks shaped like swords. Market stalls shout over one another with increasingly aggressive deals on onions. Somewhere nearby, a goat is disagreeing loudly with a pottery cart. Yet, despite the full bloom of daylight, you spot something quieter, something delicate. Near the base of a ziggurat, tucked beside a shrine to Nabu, is a small artisan stall. Not flashy. No bells, no shouting. Just a shaded canopy and a low table covered in what looks at first like broken dishes. You step closer. They're not broken. They're game boards. Tiny ones. Carved into bone, glazed onto tile fragments, inlaid with bits of glass, ivory, obsidian. Some are no larger than a coin. Others could fit in the palm of your hand. Some are square, others round, one even shaped like a fish. The artisan looks up from where he's polishing a piece no larger than your thumb. His face is weathered but bright-eyed, with fingers stained the same ochre as the tile edges. "You play?" he asks. You nod, cautiously. "Good," he says. "Because these aren't decorations." He picks up a miniature board etched with a spiral and places it between you on the table. Then he slides two equally tiny pieces toward you, one shaped like a lion, the other like a flower. You take the flower. Somehow, it feels right. The rules are explained quickly, almost musically. Move one square per turn, avoid the broken line. Tiles, land on a circle to reverse direction, and never, under any circumstances, try to jump the spiral. "What happens if I do?" you ask. He smiles. "Then you must sing." Of course, you play several rounds, the board no larger than your palm, the pieces so tiny they threaten to slide with each breath. The artisan's movements are graceful, steady, unhurried. His lion piece darts and dances while your flower clings to safe zones like a cautious librarian crossing a crowded tavern. At one point, you land on a tile with a mosaic of dots shaped like an eye. The artisan stops. "Lucky spot," he murmurs. "This one remembers." He tells you about memory tiles, parts of a board said to hold the stories of past games. Superstition, perhaps. But in a city where even dice have personalities, you're not so sure. You win one round. Barely. The artisan laughs. "Beginners. Blessin'. Or maybe the tile likes you." He opens a small cedar box beside the table, filled with charms. Each one is a game piece, but also more than that. Tokens of luck, protection, memory. You see one shaped like a sun, another like a scorpion, one that looks suspiciously like a loaf of bread. "You may choose one," he says, "if you promise to use it, not keep it in a jar." You pick a piece shaped like a spiral, just like the board. Its center is filled with a glimmering speck of blue glass. When you hold it, it feels faintly warm. "For balance," the artisan says, and because flower players don't cheat. Historians know that Babylonian artisans crafted exquisite game boards, some for the elite, others for everyday players. What's debated is whether these miniatures were used seriously or were symbolic, perhaps gifted to travelers or given as talismans. Here, it's clear. These are meant to play. To connect. You ask if people really use these tiny boards on the road. Of course, he says. Best way to make peace in a caravan is to challenge someone to a game. It's hard to stay angry while trying not to sneeze on a tile the size of a lentil. He shows you a few more pocket boards from Dillman, bone-carved grids from the mountains, even one with grooves designed to keep sand from interfering during desert travel. No rules included, he says, just memory. Before you leave, he presses one last token into your hand. It's not for playing. It's for passing on. When you find someone who's forgotten how to play, he says, give them this. You nod, tucking both tokens carefully into your pouch. The city hums louder now, the sunlight higher, but the world feels steadier. As if you're not just wandering through Babylon, you're weaving through its deeper rhythms. Because sometimes the smallest boards hold the longest stories. And sometimes the pieces remember. Midday in Babylon means one thing: heat. It raises from the stone streets like a second, invisible river curling upward, making even the shadows sweat. Most sensible people seek refuge under awnings or in courtyards with fig trees and slowly dripping water jars. You, however, are following the sound of a gavel, not a courtroom gavel, mind you, but a thick wooden stick slapping rhythmically against a clay tablet, accompanied by sharp, stern voices. You turn down a narrow passage between administrative buildings and emerge into a dusty square surrounded by benches. At the center is a raised platform with a painted canopy and two guards standing, so still you suspect they've turned to stone out of spite. This is a public court, but not for theft or tax evasion. This is for gaming disputes. On the platform stands a man with robes crisp enough to slice fruit and a face that suggests he hasn't lost a round of anything since birth. He is reciting accusations from a clay tablet in the exact tone someone might use to accuse you of ruining the harvest. And furthermore, he declares, the accused did knowingly introduce an unregistered fourth dice into a regulated 3-shell match, thereby violating Article 6 of the Competitive Gaming Code. The crowd gasps. Someone murmurs, Article Vi? That's the dice alignment clause. Historians debate whether Babylon had formal game laws or if these were hyperlocal customs turned semi-official. Some clay tablets reference fines, codes, even public shaming. Others suggest it was all theater ritualized scolding for an audience. Hungry for drama. The accused is a thin man with an impressive mustache and a tattered tunic that screams low-stakes gambler with high-stakes flair. He defends himself passionately. I admit I brought in the fourth dice, he says, but it was purely decorative. I never rolled it. Not once. May Marduk strike me with hiccups if I lie. The judge raises an eyebrow. We have witnesses. Who saw it land on a 6? It fell, the man yells. It fell from the table, someone in the crowd snorts. And right onto a rosette square. The proceedings continue. Fines are issued not in coin, but in forfeited tokens. The accused loses 3 pieces from his personal set and is banned from the Evening Tavern League for 5 days. It's dramatic. It's mildly ridiculous. And it's fair. Because in Babylon, even the games have rules. And rules? They matter. You ask a nearby spectator how often this kind of court happens. Weekly, she says. Unless someone tries to play reverse. Then it's daily. Reverse your? Oh, she grins. It's just regular but backward. And cursed. After the hearing, you visit the adjacent kiosk, where 2 scribes sit under a striped parasol selling laminated copies of the official Babylonian Rules Codex, Volume 7. You flip through it. Section 4. Legal. Tile Shapes Section 7. Dice Material Regulations. Section 12. Maximum Acceptable Gloating Duration 7 seconds. You buy a copy for posterity. Just beyond the court, another man sits at a booth marked Dispute Resolution via Rematch. He offers to let you settle arguments using a simple hand. Game first to 2 out of 3. You play a sample round. You lose. Instantly, he nods. Your appeal has been denied. You don't mind. Before you leave, the judge from earlier steps down from the platform. He removes his official sash and stretches his arms like someone just released from stone. You ask if he plays for fun. Never, he says deadpan. But my brother does. Cheats like a goat on stilts. He presses a token into your hand. It's shaped like a little judge's gavel, carved from dark wood. On the bottom, a single etched dot. For remembering the rules, he says, or ignoring them with style. You thank him, once again realizing that in this city, the games never stop, but neither does the care put into how they're played. Because Babylon understands something modern minds often forget. The rules aren't there to ruin the fun. They're what make the fun real. It's later now, and the light begins to soften again, no longer the hammering heat of midday, but the warm slide into evening. Babylon hums in its quiet hour. The market's slow, shadows stretch, and for a brief moment, everything breathes. Then, someone shouts, "Games are poison to the soul." You turn instinctively, half expecting to see someone holding a broken dice cup and a grudge. Instead, it's a street preacher standing on a crate that looks like it once carried figs and now carries fury. He's dressed in layers that suggest heat stroke and conviction. Around him, a loose crowd has gathered, some amused, others annoyed. "You waste your minds," he cries, rolling bones while the stars weep above you, while your ancestors scream. In shame, someone in the crowd snorts. "My ancestor invented dice. I saw him lose 6 in a row," yells another. You pause just outside the fray. The preacher isn't wrong, not entirely. There's always been debate, moral, cultural, divine about games. Are they distractions? Dangerous indulgences? Tools of fate, or simply excuses to dodge chores? Historians note the occasional cuneiform tablet warning against excessive leisure. Some priests argued that games dulled the spirit, frayed the discipline of the soul. Others quietly joined game nights and lost 3 times before claiming divine interruption. The preacher, meanwhile, is picking up steam. Your hearts are idle, your minds dulled. You gamble fig seeds while your futures rot like fish in the sun. A woman steps forward, calm, unimpressed. She's holding a child by the hand and a knucklebone in her other palm. "You know what I did this morning?" she says. "I played a match with my daughter, taught her to count, to wait, to laugh when she lost." The preacher blinks. She continues. "Tomorrow, she'll play again. And maybe next week, she'll win. And maybe the week after, she'll teach me something." The crowd murmurs with approval. The preacher hesitates. Someone hands him a piece. "Best of 3? He glares at it as though holding a beetle. But he doesn't throw it away. Instead, he climbs off the crate. "I shall consider your counterpoint," he mutters, and walks off. A few people clap. Most go back to what they were doing. Babylon doesn't. Cling to outrage. It lets it pass like sand through fingers. You approach the woman, who now sits cross-legged with her daughter under a tree, playing with a tiny set carved from dried date pits. "You handle that well," you say. She smiles. "He'll be back." They always come back. But eventually, they sit down. You watch the child make a move, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. "Games are easy to hate," the woman adds, "when you only see the surface." But the surface lies. You sit for a while, just watching. The pieces clack gently on the stone. The tree rustles. The child winds around and barely contains her excitement. Her mother makes a great show of defeat, clutching her chest and saying, "Oh no! The mighty goddess of gaming has fallen." The girl giggles uncontrollably. You remember a line someone whispered last night. Even the gods play dice. But only mortals pretend to hate it. Before you leave, the woman offers you one of the date pit pieces. It's misshapen, barely a circle, but it's marked with a single groove down the center. For the next time someone says it's a waste of time, she says, you can remind them, every culture has dice, but only the foolish fear laughter. You nod, pocket the piece, and as you walk away, you realize that the city needs its prophets of doom, if only to remind it why it laughs. Why it plays dot because Babylon isn't blind to excess. It knows the danger of obsession. But it also knows the deeper truth, that play is not escape. It's how people practice being alive. In joy, in risk, in rules and breaking them, in loss and in mercy. The sun dips lower. The stones cool. The day starts whispering toward night again, and you're still playing. Evening falls again like an old friend settling beside you, no fanfare, no noise, just a soft hand on your shoulder and a quiet suggestion. Let it go now. But Babylon doesn't sleep so much as shift. What was chatter becomes murmurs. What was? Trading becomes stories. What was play becomes memory. You find yourself walking through a district where the plaster peels a bit more and the windows hang a little crooked. The homes are older. The streets curve unpredictably, like someone drew them by hand and forgot to use a ruler. And yet, in this quieter, wearier corner of the city, the boards are still out, not in grand displays, not for tournaments or boasting, just resting there, etched into stoops, painted on walls, even scratched into the backs of doors. Worn boards, faded pieces. A grid carved into a barrel lid. A half-played game on a windowsill, waiting for an opponent who may have gone to fetch figs and never came back. You pass one doorway where an elderly man sits alone, moving a single piece back and forth slowly across a board as cracked as the wall behind him. He sees you. Come, he says. Finish the game. He left mid-match 8 years ago. You sit. You don't ask who he is. A friend? A brother? A son? The board doesn't say. The man moves slowly, like every turn is a line from a long poem. You move in kind, matching. His pace. After a few minutes, he chuckles. You play like him. Always cautious. Always circling. I've been watching a lot of matches, you admit. He nods. Then you've learned more than most. You lose the game. Gracefully. He nods again and returns to his chair. Come back tomorrow, he says. You promise. Around the next bend, you find an abandoned house with a game board still painted on the interior wall, faint spirals and star marks. Beside it, a piece lies waiting in the dust. You brush it off. It's shaped like a bird. You leave it exactly where it was, even in silence. The game waits. Historians sometimes point to the fall of great cities, the crumbling gates, the broken aqueducts, the fading economies, and forget the smaller signs. The persisting signs. In Babylon, as empires rise and decline, as kings are forgotten and laws rewritten, the games go on. Quietly. With fewer pieces maybe, but no less heart. You pass a courtyard where two children barefoot, hollow-eyed, laughing. Anyway, are playing a game with bottle caps and lines drawn in ash. They shout rules at each other as they go. You have to jump if I blink twice. No blinking allowed during sunset. You blinked. You blinked first. They erupt into laughter. You toss them a small token from your pouch, the flower-shaped. One, worn smooth. They stare at it like it's treasure. One kisses it. The other tries to eat it. You don't stop them. It's all part of the game. You end the day seated on a rooftop, watching the sun tuck itself behind the temples. Around you, you see pieces of the board that is Babylon. Not just the city, but the people, the players, the spaces in between. Hear one final game below a man and a woman, older, calling out moves in alternating verse. Each line rhymes. Every win is answered with a compliment. Every loss with a memory. You've beaten me again, he says. Only because you taught me how, she replies. You don't watch. You don't need to, because tonight, you've come to understand what no scholar's tablet can quite capture. Games. Here are not decoration. They are not entertainment. They are architecture not just in stone, but in time. In ritual. In memory. Every etched line in a board is a decision. Every worn piece is a touch point. Every rule, remembered or rewritten, is a whisper passed from hand to hand over centuries. And every player? A builder of something that outlasts bricks. You return, as all things do in Babylon, to silence. Not the empty kind, not the absence of noise, but the fullness of something complete. A lull, a breath. The moment after the final move, you find yourself once more in that alley where your journey began, narrow, shaded, still. The same stone boards are there, etched into walls and doorsteps, corners smooth from 1,000 fingertips. The oil lamps have long gone out, but the memory of them remains in the faint sound of burnt wick and laughter. You sit, you reach into your pouch, and take out the pieces you've collected, a mismatched army of tokens. The ivory sunburst from the merchants, the fishbone from the Knucklebones League, the carved star from the temple, the spiral tile from the artisan, the wooden gavel from the judge, and even that flat clay disc etched with forgotten Elamite swirls. Each one carries the echo of a game, a story, a face. Together, they're a timeline in your pocket. You arrange them in a circle on the stone. No rules, no scoring. Just memory. And just then, a soft breeze rustles through the alley, scattering a few dry leaves across the stones. One lands in the Zenmon lands in the center of your circle. It looks almost like a playing piece. You smile. From somewhere nearby, the faintest sound of a game begins again. A quiet clatter of dice, a soft giggle, the murmur of another round being played. Somewhere in the vast and untraceable sprawl of Babylon, and you know, it never ends. The people change. The boards wear down. The rules evolve, argue with themselves. Forget who invented them in the first place, but the playing goes on. Because in Babylon, games are not something you do. They are something you are. A way to live, to laugh, to lose gracefully, to win humbly, to remember. Even after the buildings fall and the scrolls fade, long after the ziggurats crumble and the scribes go silent, someone will pick up a stone, draw a grid in the dirt, and play. And in that moment, Babylon breathes again. Now, as your eyes begin to close, feel the warmth of the stone beneath your fingers. Imagine the soft glow of oil lamps flickering across dusty courtyards. Picture the quiet clack of polished dice echoing in the hush before dawn, and the smile of an opponent. Who knows you just rolled your best move yet? Let your breathing slow. Inhale the scent of baked clay and fig bread. Exhale the weight of the day. Listen to the lullaby of Babylon, of games played under stars, of children giggling over pebbles, of old men whispering strategies like bedtime stories passed down from a time before time. Feel your thoughts roll. Gently like dice on a smooth board. Let them scatter, rest, and settle into stillness. You are not alone. The city surrounds you, ancient and kind, its walls softened by laughter and loss and play. You're part of something old and simple, and that's more than enough. You've played well. You've remembered what mattered. And now, it's time to drift. Let the boards fade. Let the tokens rest. Let the city dim into dream. You are safe. You are full. And the game? The game will be here when you wake.